Abigail Johnson always thought she knew her family, but one shocking secret turns her world upside down. Lies, betrayal, and a dangerous agenda lurk closer than she ever imagined. Will she survive the storm, or will the truth destroy everything she loves? The first time Abigail Johnson saw Brookside Manor, it was draped in the kind of mist that felt alive. It curled and shifted across the grounds like a restless spirit, swallowing the jagged tips of the iron gates and obscuring the stone facade until the building appeared to breathe in the cold autumn air. Abigail wasn't easily spooked. 6 years in investigative journalism had taught her that most haunted places were just rotting beams and exaggerated legends, but something about this estate stirred a heaviness in her chest. Maybe it was the way the trees leaned inward along the drive, their branches clawing like skeletal fingers. Maybe it was the silence, the way sound seemed to vanish the moment you passed through the gate. Or maybe it was because she knew the file in her bag contained the word murder. Her car crunched over the gravel path, headlights cutting narrow cones through the fog. She parked near the front steps, the stone slick with moss, and reached for her bag. Inside were her tools, a leather-bound notebook, 2 pens, a small digital recorder, and the thin manila folder stamped with the Brookside insignia. It had been couriered to her office in the city without a return address. No cover letter, just a single photograph of a woman's face, pale, serene, and unmistakably dead, along with a short typed note. This was not an accident. Come before they bury the truth. Abigail had received stranger tips before, but never one so direct. Never one that felt like it was addressed to her personally. She stepped out into the night air. The scent of wet leaves and something faintly metallic blood, she thought before she could stop herself, filled her nose. Her boots made hollow sounds on the flagstones as she approached the heavy oak door. It groaned when she knocked, as if the wood itself resented being disturbed. A tall man in his late 50s answered, his hair silver and neatly combed, his posture military straight. "Miss Johnson?" he asked, voice deep, eyes sharp. "Yes. And you are?" "Harold Pritchard, estate manager. You're expected." He stepped aside. Abigail crossed the threshold into a cavernous hall where the air felt cooler than outside. The walls were paneled in dark mahogany, hung with portraits whose eyes seemed to follow her. She caught the faint scent of old books, polished brass, and the ghost of some floral perfume. Pritchard led her to a drawing room lit by a crackling fire. A woman in her early 60s sat in a high-backed chair, her black dress impeccably tailored. Her hair, like snow, was swept into a precise bun. "Miss Johnson," the woman said with a faint smile. "I am Eleanor Brookside." Abigail had researched the family name on the drive. The Brooksides were old money, shipping magnates who had diversified into real estate and politics. But the recent scandal, involving the death of Eleanor's niece Margaret, had been neatly buried by the local press. Officially, Margaret had fallen from a third-floor balcony during a party. No foul play suspected. "You received my note," Eleanor continued, her gaze unwavering. "Good. That means you're willing to see what others refuse to." Abigail sat, her recorder already in her pocket. "Mrs. Brookside, why don't you tell me what you think happened to your niece?" Eleanor's fingers tightened around her teacup. "Margaret was pushed, and I know who did it. But the police, they've been persuaded to look the other way." Her words hung in the air like the smoke from the fire, heavy and unyielding. Abigail leaned forward. "Then why me?" "Because," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "you are not afraid to dig in the dark. And Brookside Manor is darker than you imagine." From somewhere deep in the house, a clock struck 9. And with it came the faintest sound, footsteps above them. Slow, deliberate. Abigail glanced at the ceiling. Eleanor didn't. She just smiled faintly, as though she'd been expecting them. The evening had settled into a suffocating quiet, the kind that makes every sound feel louder than it should. Abigail sat at her kitchen table, nursing a cold cup of tea. The steam had long since died away, leaving behind a bitter, metallic tang that made her stomach twist. She wasn't drinking it, just holding it, as if the ceramic mug could anchor her to something solid. The events of the last 48 hours still spun in her head like a broken record. Her father's words, his cold stare, the sharpness in his tone, they were engraved into her mind. No matter how many times she tried to tell herself she didn't care, she knew she was lying. The knock at the door startled her. It wasn't a soft, hesitant knock. It was deliberate, confident, the kind that says, "I know you're inside, and I'm not leaving until you answer." Her pulse quickened. For a split second, she considered ignoring it. But curiosity, and something darker, a kind of dread, pushed her to her feet. She opened the door. And there he was, Marcus Gray. He hadn't changed much since the last time she'd seen him. That was almost 2 years ago, at her mother's funeral. His dark hair was now flecked with silver, his tailored suit was as sharp as ever, and his eyes, those sharp gray eyes that always seemed to be cataloging everything, calculating the next move. Marcus wasn't family, but he might as well have been. He'd been her father's right-hand man at the firm for over a decade. "Abigail," he said smoothly, his voice carrying a mix of politeness and something colder underneath. "May I come in?" She didn't answer immediately. She knew better than to let Marcus in easily. The man wasn't just a corporate strategist, he was a master manipulator. She had learned the hard way that nothing he did was without an agenda. "What do you want?" she asked instead. He gave her a faint smile. "I think you'll want to hear this in private." Her gut told her this was a mistake, but she stepped aside anyway. If Marcus was here, it meant something was in motion, something her father was likely orchestrating. He walked in like he owned the place, his gaze scanning the modest apartment. She could practically see him filing away details for later use, the unopened bills on the counter, the half-finished painting leaning against the wall, the untouched bottle of wine in the corner. "Your father isn't happy with the way things ended last week," Marcus began, turning to face her. "He thinks you're making a mistake." Abigail let out a bitter laugh. "He's made that clear." Marcus's smile didn't falter. "He's also concerned about certain documents." Her body tensed. "What documents?" He tilted his head, studying her. "The ones you took from the office before you left." She felt heat rush to her face. "I didn't take anything." "Abigail." His voice was calm, but laced with warning. "Lying will only make this worse." Something inside her snapped. "Worse? He's already tried to destroy my career. He's made sure no firm in the city will hire me. How exactly does it get worse?" Marcus stepped closer, his presence suddenly suffocating. "It gets worse when he decides to make it personal. Your finances, your reputation, your friends. You know how far he's willing to go." Her heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "Tell him I'm not scared." Marcus's eyes gleamed with something between amusement and pity. "You should be." With that, he turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him. Abigail stood frozen, the silence pressing in on her again. She knew Marcus's visit wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration. Her father was going to war, and if she didn't act first, she'd be crushed. She sank into her chair, her mind already racing. The documents Marcus had mentioned, she didn't have them. But she knew exactly which ones he was talking about, and she knew who had them, which meant she had a choice. Walk away now and let her father win. Or dig in, take a risk and fight back. Her hands trembled, but her decision was already made. The rain had finally stopped by morning, but the house still smelled faintly of wet earth and would smoke. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand, a sharp, insistent vibration that pulled me from uneasy dreams. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something in the way it kept going made my chest tighten. I reached for it, rubbing my eyes. The caller ID flashed Detective Marlowe. My stomach flipped. "Hello." My voice was rough. "Danielle, I need you to come down to the station." His tone was brisk, stripped of any pretense of comfort. "We've uncovered something new." The words sent a chill down my spine. My first thought was of my father's letter, the one I hadn't told Marlowe about. The one that now sat folded, worn from my constant handling, inside my coat pocket. "What is it?" I asked. "Better if you see it yourself," he said. "But you're going to want to prepare yourself." At the station, the air felt heavier than usual, as if the fluorescent lights themselves carried some oppressive weight. Marlowe led me into a small room with a metal table and laid out a stack of photographs. "This," he said, sliding the top photo toward me, "was taken at a storage facility outside of town. One, your father rented under an alias." The photo showed a rusted metal door, its lock freshly cut. The next image made my breath hitch. boxes stacked to the ceiling, their sides marked with my father's distinctive, blocky handwriting. I glanced at Marlo. What's inside? Documents, old contracts, land deeds, financial ledgers going back almost 30 years. It looks like your father was keeping detailed records of every questionable deal he ever made. The weight of his words pressed against my ribs. I remembered being a child and watching my father burn papers in the fireplace late at night, the orange glow flickering against his face. I used to think it was just grown-up work I wouldn't understand. Marlo continued, "We also found this." He slid another photo across the table, a blurry image of a man in a dark coat, taken by what looked like a security camera. "Recognize him?" he asked. The face was partly shadowed, but the shape of the jaw, the way he carried himself, my chest went cold. "That's Nathan," I whispered. "My father's oldest friend." Marlo leaned back in his chair, studying me. "He's been visiting that storage unit for years, even after your father's death. We think he might be the key to understanding what your father was hiding." By the time I left the station, my thoughts were a storm. Nathan had been to every family barbecue, every holiday dinner. He taught me how to skip stones on the lake. And now he was tied to whatever shadowy network my father had kept alive in secret. The drive back to the house was a blur. When I pulled into the driveway, the first thing I noticed was the curtain in the living room, slightly parted, like someone had been watching for my return. Inside, the air felt charged, as if someone had just been there. My coat was barely off when I saw it, a single envelope sitting in the center of the coffee table. No stamp, no name, just a faint, almost invisible smear of mud on the corner. I sat down slowly, heart pounding, and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with neat, deliberate handwriting I recognized immediately. "Danielle, you're asking the wrong questions. Stop before you get hurt. N." My fingers trembled. I stared at the letter, hearing the distant echo of my father's voice in my mind, the way he used to warn me about digging too deep into things that don't concern you. But now I knew. It concerned me more than anyone, and I wasn't going to stop. The letter burned in my hands, the words scrawled in Nathan's unmistakable handwriting, a cold warning I could not ignore. My father's voice echoed in my memory, sharp and urgent. "Some doors, Danielle, once opened, can't be closed. Know when to step back." I stared at the envelope again, imagining Nathan's face, the friendly, trusted man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had cheered at every school play, every soccer game. That man had warned me in the quietest way possible, hiding threats behind familiarity. And now he was part of the puzzle my father left behind. I couldn't sit still. I had to know what he was protecting, what secrets had been buried in that dusty storage unit. That evening, I returned to the storage facility, pretending to be a delivery worker. The gates creaked under my hand as I pushed them open. The faint smell of dust and rust hit me first, then the rows of metal lockers, each marked with numbers fading from age. I found the one with my father's handwriting, Unit 37B. The lock had already been cut, the metal clasp hanging loose. My pulse quickened. Inside, the boxes were stacked meticulously, every corner labeled, every envelope sorted. I pulled one open, and the contents made my stomach twist. Contracts, photographs, letters, and ledgers. Some documents were mundane, but others revealed something far darker: financial manipulation, bribery, even threats to competitors. The breadth of it was staggering, the scale almost unbelievable. And then I found a folder with my name on it, in my father's neat handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were photographs, me as a child, Nathan in the frame in almost every picture. But alongside them were images I didn't recognize, clandestine meetings, handshakes in shadowed rooms, faces I'd never seen. Names written on the back, scribbled in my father's familiar script. It was clear Nathan had been more than a friend. He was a key player in whatever underground network my father had created. I barely heard the footsteps until a shadow fell over me. "Nathan," I said, my voice tight with disbelief and fury. He stepped into the dim light, face calm, almost serene. "I was hoping we wouldn't meet like this," he said. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Why? Why all this? You knew him. You knew him." My voice shook. "And you were part of it. Part of whatever he was hiding." Nathan sighed, stepping closer, his hands raised in mock surrender. You're smarter than you look, Danielle. But you have no idea how deep this goes. Your father left instructions, precautions. You shouldn't be here. Not yet. Not yet. I snapped. You're talking in riddles. Tell me the truth. Now. He shook his head slowly. Truth is dangerous. You think this is just about money or old grudges. It's bigger than that. You've been protected for years, kept in the dark for your safety. And now that he's gone, you're exposed. A cold dread settled in my chest. Exposed to what? Nathan's eyes narrowed. People who will stop at nothing to keep what your father controlled. People who think you're a threat. People who will hurt you if they have to. I felt a wave of nausea. Every childhood memory, every trusted face, suddenly seemed coated in a layer of deception. My father had shielded me all these years, and Nathan had. What? Betrayed him. Protected me selectively? The lines blurred. I forced myself to stay calm. I need answers, Nathan. Not warnings. Not riddles. Answers. Nathan studied me, his gaze calculating. Then, finally, he nodded. Fine. But know this. Once you go further, there's no turning back. Your father's enemies didn't vanish when he died. They've been waiting. He handed me a small envelope, heavier than the previous one, sealed with a wax stamp I recognized from one of the photographs. My hands shook as I broke it open. Inside were names, dates, locations, a map of everything my father had built and hidden, everything Nathan had been maintaining. And at the bottom, a note in my father's handwriting. Danielle, trust no one completely. Follow the path, protect yourself, and remember why we fight. You are stronger than they know. Dad. The night air outside the storage unit was sharp, bracing. I clutched the documents to my chest, heart racing. The pieces were starting to fall into place. The web my father had created, Nathan's role, the danger I had unknowingly walked into. But one thought dominated my mind. If Nathan had been keeping me safe all this time, why the warning? Why risk everything by leaving me alone now? The answer was clear in the pit of my stomach. Someone was coming for me. And this time, I would have to face them on my own. The city felt different that night, sharper, darker, as if it had been waiting for me to make my move. I kept the envelope pressed against my chest, the names and addresses burning through my thoughts. Every shadow seemed a threat, every footstep behind me a predator. I knew I couldn't stay home, not until I understood who was coming for me and why. My father's warnings rang in my ears. Trust no one completely. But where could I go? Whom could I trust? Nathan, it seemed, was part guide, part obstacle, an ally whose loyalty was conditional at best. I decided to start with the most tangible lead, the first name on the list. A man named Victor Kane, a mid-level financier who had appeared in several photographs with my father and Nathan. The notes suggested he controlled key transactions that had kept my father's network afloat. I spent the night tracing every detail I could find online: addresses, phone numbers, LinkedIn profiles. It was meticulous, obsessive work, but by dawn, I had a plan. If I confronted Victor, I could start untangling the network piece by piece, understanding what my father had built, and perhaps uncovering who was planning to come after me. Victor's office was a sleek, modern building downtown, all glass and steel, designed to intimidate. I slipped past security with a fake ID Nathan had once given me for emergencies, a remnant from my father's protective measures. Once inside, the lobby was silent, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. I found Victor's office on the 23rd floor. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Victor looked up from his desk, startled but quickly recovering. Abigail Johnson, he said, his tone cold, almost amused. I wasn't expecting you. You knew I'd come, I said sharply, stepping inside. I need answers. He leaned back, hands steepled, studying me like a chess piece. Your father's network was complicated, dangerous. And yes, you're right to be concerned. But do you think you can understand it all at your age? I didn't flinch. I've seen the documents. I know more than you think. And I'm not leaving until I know who's after me and why. Victor's eyes hardened. Smart girl. Dangerous. Your father would have been proud. But you're in over your head. Some people will kill to protect what he built. I can handle myself, I said, though the truth gnawed at me. Every story, every encounter with Nathan, Every photograph I'd seen now carried a new weight. I wasn't just fighting for answers anymore, I was fighting for my life. Victor sighed and leaned forward, dropping his voice to a whisper. Your father's enemies are closer than you think. Some of them were in your life the entire time. Friends, colleagues, even family. They've been waiting for the right moment to strike, and your father's death created an opening. The word sent a chill down my spine. Family? Could Nathan be part of this? Or someone I trusted, someone who had always seemed loyal, like my closest friends? I forced myself to stay calm. Panic would be dangerous. I need names, locations, anything concrete. I demanded. Victor hesitated, then slid a thin folder across the desk. This is everything I can give you. But Abigail, once you start down this path, there's no turning back. Every step you take, every decision will be watched. And if you make a mistake, there's no one left to save you. I opened the folder carefully. Inside were detailed logs, meetings, payments, coded messages. Notes in my father's handwriting appeared alongside annotations by Nathan. It was all connected, a network of influence, protection, and danger I had barely glimpsed until now. Back on the street, the folder clutched tightly in my hands, I realized the full scope of the threat. The city lights blurred as I walked, every car, every passerby a potential observer. I needed a safe place to analyze the information, to start planning my next moves. I chose an old cabin my father had once used for retreats, off the grid, hidden in the outskirts of the city. Nathan had shown me the location once, insisting it was only to be used in emergencies. Tonight, it became my sanctuary. Inside, I spread out the folder, the documents forming a complex web. Names repeated, connections appeared, and one phrase stood out in bold letters on a piece of paper. Project Helix, protect the legacy. My father had left me a code, a plan to safeguard his work, and to survive the threats now targeting me. The night stretched long. I cross-referenced documents, mapped connections, and tried to anticipate who might make the first move. Somewhere deep in the shadows of the city, someone was watching, waiting, calculating. And I was no longer just a child of Abigail Johnson. I was a key player in a dangerous game, one that could cost me everything if I failed. By dawn, I had a strategy: confront Nathan directly, demand his truth, and then follow the trail of Project Helix. I knew he would be expecting me, but I couldn't wait. Every hour, every minute counted. As the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, I packed my things, double-checked the folder, and stepped into the cold morning air. My heart raced, my mind focused. The line between friend and foe had blurred, and I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Because the moment I did, everything would change for Nathan, for me, and for the legacy my father had fought to protect. The streets were empty when I arrived at Nathan's apartment. The city still hummed with life in the distance, but here, in this quieter district, shadows pooled in alleys and around streetlights, almost as if they were waiting for me to make a misstep. I held the folder close to my chest, the weight of its contents grounding me, reminding me why I had come. I knocked once, sharply. No answer. Twice. My pulse quickened. Then the door clicked open and Nathan appeared. He looked almost casual in his hoodie and jeans, but the tension in his jaw betrayed him. "Abigail," he said, voice calm, though his eyes flickered with unease. "I figured you'd come. Sit down." I didn't move. "Nathan, enough games. I know about Project Helix. I know the network my father built. I know people are after me. Now tell me everything. No omissions, no lies." Nathan ran a hand through his hair. "You're not ready for everything, Abigail. There are layers. People you trust might be compromised. And if you act too fast, if you make a mistake," he let the thread hang in the air. "I'm ready," I said firmly. "I've seen the folder. I've traced the names. I know the risks. Every second I waste not knowing could be my last. You can't hide this from me anymore." Nathan studied me for a long moment, then motioned for me to follow him inside. The apartment was small but meticulously organized, papers and documents tucked into neat stacks, whiteboards filled with names, numbers, and lines connecting them. It looked like the nerve center of the entire operation, and now I understood why my father had trusted Nathan as much as he had. Project Helix was my father's plan to protect everything he built, Nathan began. But it wasn't just financial. It was political, technological. It's bigger than you imagine. And now that he's gone, the people who wanted to see him fail are closing in. I leaned against the table, scanning the notes on the whiteboard. Who are they? And why me? Nathan sighed. They see you as the weak link. They think a young woman, alone, with no direct experience, will be easy to manipulate, easy to eliminate. But your father, he left clues for you. Tests to see if you could rise to the challenge. That's why Victor gave you the folder. I swallowed hard. Tests. My father's death. Everything that's happened, it wasn't random. Nothing about this was random, Nathan said. But Abigail, you have to understand. To survive, you need allies. And not everyone can be trusted. Some of the people closest to you are already compromised. The words hit me like a physical blow. My mind raced friends, mentors, even colleagues I had trusted without question. Could any of them be part of this network working against me? Start with the names, I demanded. I need to know who is friend, who is enemy, and who is somewhere in between. Nathan nodded and pulled up a digital map on his tablet. Names, addresses, and connections appeared, forming a web that seemed impossibly complex. Here, he said, pointing. Victor Kane, he's part of the financial oversight. He's dangerous but predictable. The ones you need to worry about are closer. People you see every day. I leaned in, studying the connections. The web was dizzying, but patterns started emerging. I recognized some of these names, colleagues, acquaintances. How could I have been so blind? Nathan shook his head. They hide in plain sight. That's why your father built Project Helix, to give you a map, a way to navigate the danger without being destroyed. But you have to move carefully. One misstep, one wrong trust, and they'll strike. I clench my fists. Then I'll be careful. I'll follow the plan. I'll uncover the truth. But Nathan, I need to know, are you truly on my side? Nathan met my gaze, his eyes steady. I am. But I can't protect you from everything. That's your job now. Your father trusted you with this, Abigail. It's your turn. Over the next several days, I immersed myself in the network, analyzing connections, cross-referencing documents, and following leads. Each discovery was a puzzle piece, each revelation a mix of relief and terror. One evening, as I was reviewing a series of encrypted messages, I noticed a recurring pattern, a code embedded in the timestamps. Whoever had sent these messages was meticulous, deliberate, and careful. But even the most careful people make mistakes. I traced the origin to a seemingly innocent tech consultancy my father had used. It was a breakthrough. The consultancy was a front, a perfect cover for those trying to infiltrate Project Helix. I realized that if I could uncover who was managing it from the inside, I might finally identify the person orchestrating the threats against me. That night, I went to the consultancy under the guise of a potential client. Every step felt like walking a tightrope. I watched employees come and go, listened to their conversations, and took mental notes. There was one person, a young man who seemed out of place, nervous, constantly glancing at his phone. His behavior screamed caution, fear, and guilt. I followed him discreetly when he left the building. He walked briskly to a parked car, looked around nervously, and entered a series of codes on a small keypad hidden beneath the steering wheel. The car door closed with a soft click, and it drove away. I knew I had to track it, but I also knew I couldn't be seen. The chase led me through narrow alleyways, empty streets, and finally to an abandoned warehouse near the docks. My pulse raced as I crept closer, listening. Inside, I could hear muffled voices, planning, arguing, strategizing. My gut told me I was on the brink of a major discovery. I moved silently, finding a vantage point through a cracked window. There I saw him, the young man, speaking with another figure, tall, imposing, wearing a mask. They spoke in hushed tones about eliminating loose ends and ensuring Project Helix stays secure. The realization hit me like a lightning bolt. This was bigger than just Victor Kane, bigger than the consultancy. Someone had infiltrated every layer of my father's network, and now I was directly in their path. I knew I had to act, but rushing in without a plan could be fatal. I backed away, taking notes, memorizing every detail. The enemy was organized, ruthless, and clever. But so was I. Back at Nathan's apartment, I lay out everything I had observed. "They're inside the network," I said, voice low but steady. "They know Project Helix, and they're eliminating anyone who threatens it. I saw them tonight, at the warehouse near the docks." Nathan's face darkened. "You're lucky you weren't seen. If they suspect you're onto them, Abigail, they won't hesitate. We need a plan. Safe houses, diversion, strategy. You're not just uncovering the truth anymore. You're a target." I nodded. "I know, but I can't stop now. My father trusted me with this. I have to see it through, to survive, and to protect his legacy." Nathan sighed. "Then we move forward. Carefully, but every move counts. One wrong step and it's over." I felt the weight of his words, but also the fire igniting within me. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice, about uncovering the truth my father had sacrificed everything to protect. And I was ready to face whatever came next. The city slept, oblivious to the storm brewing in its shadows. But Abigail Johnson was awake, alert, and determined. The game had changed, the stakes were higher, and the next move would determine not just her fate, but the future of everything her father had built. The dawn was gray and quiet, the city shrouded in mist that made every street and alleyway seem uncertain, as if it could hide enemies in plain sight. I didn't sleep. Every moment since the warehouse confrontation had replayed in my mind. The masked figure, the whispered threats, the knowledge that I was now a target. Nathan arrived at my apartment before sunrise, carrying a small backpack with essential gear, encrypted devices, surveillance equipment, and a tactical map of the city with safe houses and points of interest marked. He moved efficiently, every motion precise, almost mechanical. I could see the tension coiled tightly beneath his calm exterior. "We don't have time," he said quietly. "They'll regroup tonight. If we wait, we might lose the opportunity to identify the mastermind behind this." I nodded. "Then we move now. I need answers, Nathan. I can't let them stay in the shadows any longer." We left the apartment silently, blending with early morning commuters and the occasional delivery truck. Nathan planned to lead me to a secure observation point near the warehouse district, the same area where I had glimpsed the masked figure, and monitor for any activity. The warehouse area was desolate at this hour, shipping containers stacked like giant blocks, cranes idle, and puddles from last night's rain reflecting the cold, pale light. Nathan and I crouched behind a container, setting up cameras and listening devices. Hours passed. The air grew colder, the silence oppressive. I questioned every decision I had made. Was I overextending? Was this pursuit of the truth worth the risk? But every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of the folder, the network, the people who were depending on me, and my father's unspoken trust. By mid-morning, movement stirred. A black SUV rolled silently through the compound, its tinted windows hiding the occupants. The vehicle stopped near one of the warehouses, and the masked figure I had seen before emerged, speaking briefly with a man in a dark suit. Nathan whispered there, "That's him or her. Whoever's orchestrating this." I focused, straining to hear. The masked figure spoke in low, deliberate tones, almost like a predator discussing a hunt. "Check the files again. Make sure there are no loose ends. Abigail Johnson is smart, but she won't get far if we tighten control." My heart raced. My name. They knew exactly who I was. Nathan handed me a small earpiece. "We need to track their movements, gather intel, and avoid detection. Remember, one mistake and they could eliminate us." I slid the earpiece into my ear, feeling the hum of potential danger. Every instinct screamed caution, but the determination to uncover the truth pushed me forward. We followed the masked figure at a distance, moving silently through alleys and side streets. Every turn was calculated, every shadow a possible threat. The figure entered a nondescript building with no signage, a perfect hideout. Nathan scanned the perimeter. "This is their hub. There could be security cameras. Guards, proceed carefully." I nodded, gripping the folder tightly. "We need to see inside. That's where the answers are." Nathan produced a small lock-picking kit, working with precise movements. The door clicked open, and we slipped inside, immediately engulfed in darkness. The building smelled of damp concrete and old electronics. Whispers echoed from deeper inside, confirming our suspicions. They were still operating here. We moved stealthily through corridors lined with server racks and filing cabinets. Screens displayed real-time data, financial transactions, personnel files, and maps detailing the city's infrastructure. And then I saw it, a large monitor showing live footage of my apartment. My pulse quickened. They had been watching me all along. "Abigail," Nathan whispered urgently, "we need to document everything, but be careful. If they spot us, it's over." I scanned the room, noting patterns, connections, and documents. Among the papers, I found something chilling, a list of targets. Names, dates, and specific vulnerabilities were marked. My name was at the top. "They're planning," I whispered. "They've been anticipating my moves." Nathan's eyes darkened. "Which means we need to move faster than they expect. We can't just react, we need to take control." Suddenly, a creak echoed behind us. I froze. The masked figure had returned, faster than we anticipated. Shadows moved in the dim light, and before we could react, the figure lunged. I dodged instinctively, pulling Nathan with me. Papers scattered, monitors flickered, and alarms began to buzz. The figure moved with terrifying precision, clearly trained. I felt the adrenaline surge, my mind sharpening. "We need an exit," Nathan shouted. I nodded, grabbing the folder and sprinting toward a side door. The masked figure pursued, but we used the layout to our advantage, ducking behind server racks and disappearing into narrow service corridors. Every step felt like a gamble, every heartbeat counted. We emerged into a back alley, gasping for breath. The figure stopped at the building's entrance, seemingly waiting, calculating. I could sense intelligence and patience in the stance. This was no ordinary adversary. Nathan looked at me grimly. "They know we're onto them. This changes everything. We can't confront them directly yet. We need leverage." I clenched my fists. "Then we find leverage. We expose them. We make them vulnerable. I will not let them control the story or my life." Nathan nodded. "Then we start digging. And we do it smart. No heroics. No impulsive moves." Over the next several days, we worked relentlessly. Every document, every encrypted message, every digital footprint was analyzed. Patterns emerged. Shell companies, offshore accounts, and hidden operatives embedded in positions of influence. The deeper I dug, the more I realized the extent of the conspiracy. It wasn't just personal, it was institutional. People in power, influential in business and politics, were part of a network built to manipulate, control, and eliminate threats to Project Helix. One night, as I reviewed surveillance footage from one of the front offices, I saw the masked figure again, this time in a meeting with several high-ranking executives. Their conversation was brutal, strategic, and calculated. They were planning a maneuver that could destroy anyone in their path, including me. I felt a cold determination settle over me. I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. I was fighting to dismantle a network of corruption, lies, and manipulation. And I would not stop until the truth was exposed. The following morning, Nathan and I prepared our first countermove. Using encrypted communications, we began contacting potential allies, those whose integrity had been tested and proven. We shared verified intelligence, building a coalition that could provide support, protection, and additional resources. Every call, every message had to be secure. Every word was a potential risk. "This is bigger than anything I imagined," I admitted, watching the digital map light up with new connections and contacts. "My father, he left me a legacy. But he also left me a battlefield." Nathan placed a hand on my shoulder. "And you're not alone in it. But Abigail, remember, the next steps will test you like never before. You will face betrayal, deception, and danger. And some truths may be more painful than you expect." I looked at the glowing map, tracing connections with my finger. "I'm ready. Every risk, every threat, I will face it. For my father, for Project Helix, and myself. They underestimated me once. They won't again." Outside, the city stirred with the morning rush, oblivious to the quiet war being waged in its shadows. But Abigail Johnson had awakened fully to her role, stepping into the storm with clarity, purpose, and an unwavering resolve. The next confrontation was coming, and this time I would be ready. The days that followed were a blur of meticulous planning, sleepless nights, and constant vigilance. Abigail Johnson had moved beyond mere survival. Every decision, every move, every contact was part of a larger strategy to dismantle the web of deception that threatened her life and everything her father had worked to protect. Nathan had set up a secure operations room in a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Multiple screens displayed live feeds from surveillance cameras, encrypted communications, and digital mapping of the targets. Every piece of intelligence gathered was cross-referenced and verified before any action was taken. "This is where strategy meets execution," Nathan said, gesturing to the wall of screens. "We have eyes on all critical points. Any suspicious activity, any movement from the masked operative or their associates, we'll see it immediately." I paced the room, folder in hand. "We need to identify the mastermind. Every move they've made, every instruction, every pattern, there has to be a central node. Someone pulling the strings." Nathan nodded. "And once we find them, we can begin to dismantle the network systematically. But Abigail, this is not going to be easy. They've operated in the shadows for years. Expect resistance, manipulation, and surprises. I steel myself. I've faced surprises before. I won't back down. This ends on my terms." Our first actionable lead came when one of the digital maps indicated unusual activity at a private corporate facility downtown. Security cameras showed high-profile figures entering and leaving with no discernible schedule. Among them was the masked operative, always careful to avoid direct identification. But patterns were emerging, a rhythm, a predictable set of movements that could be exploited. "We follow, we observe, and we document," I instructed Nathan. "No engagement yet. We need evidence first." For 3 consecutive nights, we monitored the facility. Each night, more details emerged. Secret meetings, encrypted document transfers, and whispered discussions about suppressing Abigail Johnson's investigation. The scope of the operation was staggering. Project Helix was far larger than Abigail had imagined. It had tentacles in finance, law enforcement, and corporate sectors. One evening, as Abigail analyzed surveillance footage, a sudden realization struck her. "Nathan, they're not just planning operations, they're setting traps. Every step we've taken has been anticipated. This facility, it's bait." Nathan frowned. "Which means we need to change tactics. We've been playing defense. Now we must shift to offense." Abigail spent hours cross-referencing documents, emails, and financial transactions. Each detail brought her closer to the true identity of the mastermind. Names, codenames, offshore accounts, and untraceable communications painted a clear picture. The leader was someone with vast resources, high-level influence, and a personal vendetta against Abigail's father. Someone who had meticulously planned Project Helix and had monitored Abigail's every move from the beginning. "We're dealing with someone brilliant," Nathan admitted. "But brilliant can be caught off guard, especially when they underestimate their opponent." Abigail's eyes narrowed. "Then it's time they learned exactly who Abigail Johnson is." The next step involved infiltration. Using data gleaned from the surveillance, Abigail created a digital persona, a convincing proxy designed to bait the mastermind into revealing critical information. Nathan handled the technical setup, ensuring that every trace could be monitored and every communication recorded. "This is risky," Nathan warned. "If they catch even a hint, it could endanger both of us." I met his gaze steadily. "I understand the risk, but risk is the only path to control. If we wait for them to strike, we'll always be one step behind." The plan was executed with precision. Over encrypted channels, Abigail sent carefully crafted messages to the operative network, positioning herself as an insider willing to provide critical intelligence. Within hours, the network took the bait. Communications flowed, revealing locations, personnel, and intentions. Abigail and Nathan watched as pieces of the puzzle fell into place. "This is it," Abigail whispered, reviewing the intercepted messages. "We have them talking to each other. We have their schedules, their safe houses, their communication codes. Everything we need to move decisively." Nathan's hands flew over the keyboard, coordinating digital surveillance and physical observation. "We can trace them to the core. The mastermind has left a trail, meticulously hidden, but it's there. We just need to follow it carefully. The confrontation was inevitable. Abigail's intelligence allowed her to pinpoint the exact time and location of the next meeting. A secluded mansion outside the city, guarded by private security and hidden surveillance systems, would host the key figures of Project Helix. "This is where it ends," Abigail said, her voice firm. "We expose them, we gather evidence, and we dismantle their operation. Tonight, Project Helix falls." Nathan nodded. "We move at midnight. We go in quietly, gather evidence, and leave without detection if possible. But be prepared, they are expecting someone to try." The night was silent, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. Abigail and Nathan approached the mansion, dressed in dark clothing and equipped with cameras, listening devices, and encrypted recorders. Every step was measured, every shadow a potential threat. Through a side window, they observed the masked operative speaking with high-ranking officials, discussing logistics and contingencies. Abigail felt a mixture of fear and determination. This was the moment everything led to, the culmination of months of planning, investigation, and courage. As Abigail began recording, a sudden noise alerted the room. A guard had spotted movement outside. Abigail's heart pounded, but she remained calm. "Nathan, we stick to the plan. Quick, precise, controlled. No mistakes." The guard moved closer, flashlight sweeping the perimeter. Abigail and Nathan froze, shadows pressed against the wall. Then, with precise timing, Nathan triggered a distraction, a small electronic pulse that temporarily disabled the cameras and alarms. Inside, chaos ensued. The masked operative and their associates scrambled, unaware of the covert observation. Abigail moved quickly, capturing evidence, screenshots, and recordings that would later unravel the entire network. By the time security regained control, Abigail and Nathan were gone, vanished into the night with irrefutable proof of Project Helix's operations. Back at the safe house, Abigail reviewed the recordings. Every plan, every directive, every attempt to manipulate and eliminate targets was documented. This was the culmination of her fight, not just for survival but for justice. Nathan looked at her, admiration and relief in his eyes. "You did it. We did it. Project Helix can't hide now. With this evidence, nothing can protect them." Abigail nodded, exhaustion and triumph mingling in her expression. "It's not over yet. We have the evidence, but now we need to ensure it reaches the right hands, those who can dismantle this network and bring the mastermind to justice." For the first time in months, Abigail allowed herself a moment of quiet. The danger had not vanished entirely, but the power had shifted. She was no longer merely reacting. She was in control, steering the course of a storm that had threatened to consume her life. And as dawn broke over the city, Abigail Johnson knew that the next chapter was about truth, justice, and reclaiming everything Project Helix had tried to take from her and the world. The morning after the operation at the mansion, Abigail Johnson sat in the safe house, the weight of months of tension pressing down on her. But beneath that weight was a steely sense of purpose. The recordings, the intercepted communications, and the documentation of Project Helix's every move were more than just evidence. They were the keys to dismantling the network and exposing the mastermind. Nathan entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you haven't slept in weeks," he said, handing her a cup. "Probably haven't," Abigail replied, though a small smile tugged at her lips. "But it's worth it. We have everything we need. Now it's time to make it count." Nathan nodded, settling into a chair. "We need to strategize. The evidence is solid, but we have to make sure it reaches the right people, law enforcement, investigative journalists, anyone who can act without compromise. Project Helix has tendrils everywhere. One misstep, and it could disappear again." Abigail took a deep breath. "I've thought about that. I've already compiled a secure digital dossier with everything we've gathered. It's encrypted and backed up in multiple locations. We'll deliver copies to trusted authorities simultaneously. They won't have time to cover it up or destroy it." The plan moved quickly. By late afternoon, Abigail and Nathan coordinated with a select group of investigative journalists and federal investigators who had a history of tackling complex criminal organizations. Each received a portion of the evidence, along with precise instructions on how to handle it securely. Hours later, Abigail watched as headlines began to appear online. Project Helix exposed. Secret network of corruption unraveled. High-level operatives under investigation following Abigail Johnson's revelation. Brave whistleblower brings justice to shadowed network. She allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. Months of risk, planning, and sleepless nights were finally paying off. But Abigail knew the mastermind would not go quietly. The masked operative's identity was still unknown to the public, and it was inevitable that they would retaliate in some way. Abigail prepared for the confrontation, reviewing every detail, every move, every contingency. Then came the call. A secure line, voice distorted but unmistakable. "You've made quite a mess, Abigail Johnson," the operative said. "But know this, you may have delayed me, but you haven't won. Project Helix is bigger than you imagine." "I don't think you understand," Abigail replied, her voice calm but firm. "You've underestimated me. I've dismantled your network, gathered irrefutable evidence, and ensured your operation is now public. Your influence is gone. It's over." A pause, then a soft, chilling laugh. "Over? You've only begun to understand the game. The real challenge is knowing what to do next, and you're still a player on my board." Abigail's eyes narrowed. "I'm done playing by your rules. From here on, I make the rules, and justice is my move." The final confrontation was set for a secure location arranged by law enforcement, a high-tech facility equipped to handle sensitive operations. Abigail arrived with Nathan, flanked by federal agents and cybersecurity experts. Inside, the mastermind awaited, still masked, still shrouded in mystery. Abigail felt a surge of adrenaline, but maintained her composure. This was the moment she had prepared for, face to face with the architect of Project Helix. "You've caused enough damage," Abigail said, stepping forward. "Your network is exposed, your operatives are compromised, and your actions have consequences." The mastermind tilted their head, voice calm and measured. "Consequences? You think this stops with me? Project Helix is more than me. It's an idea, a system, a network. Eliminating me won't erase it." Abigail smiled faintly. "Maybe, but ideas only matter when people follow them. And everyone who followed you is now under investigation. Your reign of manipulation ends tonight." Law enforcement moved in, securing the mastermind and the remaining operatives. Abigail watched as the masked figure was led away, finally unmasked, revealing a high-ranking corporate executive who had spent years orchestrating Project Helix in secret. The relief that washed over Abigail was profound. Months of fear, meticulous planning, and unrelenting focus had culminated in justice. Nathan placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it, Abigail. You saw it through. You protected yourself, your family, and countless others who would have been victims of this network." Abigail exhaled slowly, exhaustion mingling with triumph. "It wasn't just me. It was the team, the evidence, and everyone willing to stand against corruption. But yes, it is over. Finally over." In the weeks that followed, Abigail continued her work, helping authorities dismantle Project Helix completely. Her efforts were recognized publicly, though she remained determinedly private about her role. The experience had changed her, strengthened her resolve, sharpened her instincts, and confirmed that courage and integrity could dismantle even the most insidious systems. Life gradually returned to a semblance of normal. Abigail returned to her family, reconnecting with loved ones and embracing the small, meaningful moments she had once taken for granted. Every morning she woke up, she was reminded of the stakes, the risks, and the triumphs. And in the quiet moments, she reflected on the journey, the danger, the strategy, the confrontation, and the eventual victory. Abigail Johnson had faced shadows, deception, and danger, and emerged not just unbroken, but stronger, wiser, and fully in command of her life. Her final thought, as she watched the sunrise from her window, was simple yet powerful: justice is not given. It is earned. And Abigail Johnson had earned it every step of the way.